Happy New Year and welcome to the release news video of WUDSN IDE 1.7. Yeah, 1.7 is a major release, the first major release since 4 years. There have been many reasons why I was reluctant to release it, mainly that doing the documentation and the videos is so much work. Nevertheless, it's done. It's up on my website. The release news in text form are available there, and you also find them via the link below the video. And I would like to go through everything in detail. I'm not sure how long this is going to take, so you better get some popcorn and a comfortable seat. First, I will skim through the text to give you an idea of the different sections that have been improved, and later I will show it in the IDE itself. So first is the build system and the release strategy. So as I said, I haven't released anything in 4 years, mostly because if I do a major release, there is a lot of work involved to really do the release itself. Not really the code behind it, but to do the release. And I wanted to get a more iterative way of working, which is why I have, first of all, automated part of the build process. This is something you don't see, but I have also introduced something that you could call a beta test, like Farron does with Altera. So besides the stable update URL, which is WUDSN/update, you also now have a WUDSN/update daily, where I publish most recent changes, test version, new features, bug fixes. So people who are interested in these things can just click an update and get the latest version, while others remain on the stable versions. The information about all versions is also here in this section, releases, where you see there is a stable version, there is a release version, there are previously published versions, and for each of them you see the Java requirement, the Eclipse requirement, the update site, and additional information like where you find the release news or where you find to read, and where you find the release news video. Okay, so let's get back to this. Yeah, regarding the functionality in the IDE, the first section of news is about the new source code annotations. Annotations were introduced in version 1.6, and they allow you to override part of the behavior defined by the preferences if you need specific settings and don't want to change the preference each time. This section of new annotations allows you to control the output file format and location. Next are improvements in the editor. When you now click compile or compile and run, it will automatically save all open files to make sure their state is persisted on the file system, so the compiler or linker or whatever is running will actually see all of your changes automatically, so you don't have to press save yourself. Next is that in the editor, wherever there is hyperlink navigation, that means something there you can click the control key and hover over a label or a file name to navigate there. There now also we have a context menu, and the standard F3 open declaration key binding will work to take you there. So you don't need the mouse anymore to do the forward navigation to a label and jump around the source code or files. You can do that via your keyboard, as you may be used to it from other languages. Yeah, next, breakpoints. Breakpoint support is also not a new feature, but what is new is that the standard views and command groups that you have in the IDE. So for the list of active breakpoints and the control buttons to activate, deactivate breakpoints, and so on, they are now integrated also with the WUDSN IDE breakpoints. And by making the standard command groups available, you can also use now keyboard shortcuts for everything that you're used to do with breakpoints. And by double-clicking one of the breakpoints in the breakpoint list, you will also be taken to the corresponding file location. Yeah, DASM, the default assembler for the VCS. There's a minor change with a major effect. So the default parameters have been changed, so it correctly generates symbols and list files with a naming and in a format that will be automatically loaded by Stellar. So similarly to Altera, loading all the labeled and list information created by Mats. Stellar can now load this information created by DASM, starting with Stellar 4.0. One hint, there is a small bug in Stellar that sometimes prevents this loading to work automatically, so you have to load it yourself. This bug has been reported to Stellar team, and they will for sure fix it soon. Yeah, for coders, one of the most important changes probably is the new symbols view. Whenever you have compiled or assembled one of your source codes and a list file and a label file have been generated, you would be interested in what are the effective values that the corresponding symbol has received. And now, after the assembler was called, not only the error messages are parsed and displayed in the IDE in the problems view, but also all symbols are parsed from the assembler output and displayed here in a structured view that allows also for display both in hexadecimal and decimal values, and enables you to filter very easily in the as an interactive filtering to narrow down which label you are interested in. I will show that later in the presentation. Yeah, then the preferences section is quite powerful, so there are a lot of preferences in Eclipse, and in particular for the assembler preferences introduced by the IDE, there have been some changes. One is that now if you change something, this will take in effect immediately. That wasn't the case previously, so you had to sometimes close and reopen the editors to make changes work. And also the syntax highlighting when you changed something and it was a huge source code active, it did several redraws and it was strange. So this is now, as you would expect, it is fast, it is once, and it looks as it should. And what's the important, that's rather a fix, and what's more important is that now you have the possibility to export your preferences into an Eclipse preference file, into an EPF file, persist them, and maybe import them to another workspace. Hex Editor. 3 new things in the Hex Editor. One is that the copy as now has a decimal copy as block format. That's important if you, or helpful, if you have data that is formatted in blocks and you want like graphics data or player information that you want to put into data or byte commands. And by formatting also decimal values in block format, you get always 3 characters per digit, so you can use cut and paste in block format to add or remove columns. The Hex Editor also now supports the save selection as in the context menu. So if you have an ATR file, you can save a sector, or if you have an executable file, a COM file, then you can select one or more segments in the outline and save them as one new binary section. That is helpful if you want to extract existing things like, for example, a raster music tracker module from an existing executable, or an intro from a cracked release. Yeah, then to support John and also another project of mine, this 6502, I have added the new content types Atari Mats file and Atari DOS SDX file for relocatable file formats to the Hex Editor. Now the Hex Editor will understand the different sections of these file formats and display them accordingly in the outline, so you see directly what there is, the structure of the file, and can navigate through the file. Yeah, next, most surprising maybe, now we have a sound editor. Again, this term editor is just the Eclipse term of having something in the IDE. It doesn't mean you really edit the sound there, but what you can do is you can now open and play any kind of Atari 8-bit sound thanks to the ASAP library from Fox, and you can also play C64 SID tunes based on JSID Play by Ken Handel. Yeah, there is a huge list of supported file formats for the Atari and for the C64, And what Fox added for me is that you can now actually not only play and see the structure and the information like the speed, the channels, the number of included songs in the sound editor, but you can also save a player. Yeah, so if you have an SAP file, for example, you can save the file again in the module again in a format that you can use in your own productions, and you get back, for example, the RMT file from an SAP file. And there will be a tutorial on how you do that. Yeah, graphics editor, there was a new graphics format for Apple Edit, and in the online help we have several new sections. The section releases that you have just seen also on the website, which links you to the versions, the update sites, and the videos. Then we have a new feature that compiler help files can be multi-language. Yeah, for example, for maths, the original is Polish, but there is also an English translation available, and if corresponding translation in the currently active languages translation is available, this translation will be used. Yeah, there are improvements in the error messages, and there is a new section to display the supported CPUs and the opcodes for these CPUs, and some more new FAQs and visualizations in the help. Yeah, and of course there is after 4 years a huge list of fixes. I will not go into the details, you can find them here. Mainly it means it should have worked like that before, and you won't be surprised that it does it now. Yeah, this is mainly for reference for people who ran into these issues. Okay, so scrolling up now, where were we at? Okay, daily build, I already explained. Source code annotations. So let's switch to the IDE. This is the Hello World example, and as you see, there is not a single annotation here. Instead, there are preferences for the assembler, Atari 8-bit, and this is a METS, what you see from this red M, this is a METS source file, and these are the global preferences that will be applied when I assemble this file. That means these are the parameters. It will assemble to the output file to the source folder. It could also be assembled to a temporary folder or a fixed folder where you can specify the folder here, and you can also specify the file extension. Well, these defaults make sense if you have a lot of different projects and they all are very small and you're just toying around. Yeah, and you don't want to think about additional folders and things for each and every small assembler file. But if you have several large projects, then you maybe want something else here. Maybe you want to have a dedicated output folder for each project and not globally. Maybe you want to create a ROM file and not an executable. Yeah, and all these things you would like not to do by switching the preferences to and fro, but you can put the corresponding annotations in the source code. So if I put, for example, the output folder annotation here, and that means I add a comment, and I do this 1, 2, 3. And if I try to assemble this now, it gets an error message and says, well, no, output folder mode 1, 2, 3, that doesn't exist. The possible values are source folder, temp folder, or fixed folder. Yeah, and these map exactly to these 3 settings here. Similarly, I can specify an output folder. Yeah, but then it says, of course, now it tries to create the output in a folder 1, 2, 3, which isn't there. Next is I can specify the file extension. As said, I could, by default, it is XEX, and I can run it. And assuming this would now not be an executable, but it would be a ROM file, yeah, I could call it .rom, and then it will try to create a ROM file, and of course this is not a ROM file, yeah, but with this you can override the defaults in the preferences. And what you can also do is you can just specify the complete file name. So if I do it other.xyz, yeah, there may be reasons why you want to do that, then you get the other xyz file here. Yeah, these are the new source code annotations to control the output. So what else did we have? Automatically saving. Yeah, well, maybe I just do that. So here we see now let's do this. If I say close at this, so now we see the small star here, which means the source code is saved. And when I press compile and run, the star is gone. Obviously the new code is there, because now when you click one of these buttons, all open editors will be saved automatically. So next is Hyperlink Navigation. Yeah, so now I click Control. And when I click Control, the mouse, whenever there is something that can be interpreted as a hyperlink, turns into a finger. And what you don't see is that I can, now I can right click the context menu and also see here Open Declaration. Yeah, and if I click that, it will jump to this line, and now I click F3 and the same thing will happen. If there are multiple choices, this navigation will pick automatically simply the first one. Okay, breakpoints. If we set a breakpoint here, let's set a breakpoint here by double clicking. Could also do it via the context menu. Then in the breakpoints view, now we see where there are breakpoints. Maybe let's remove these breakpoints that we previously had, and now I see I'm in a different file, but this view is configured that all the breakpoints from all files are listed here. And if I can, what I can do now is I can just double click in the list of breakpoints that I have, and I will automatically be taken to that location in the corresponding source file and line. And yeah, the customize view, let's go to customize view, customize perspective. There is the breakpoint section, and here you have the corresponding entries for the toolbar, and also there are the different menu entries and things that you can activate. There's a command group for the breakpoints. This is what I want. Yeah, and so you can make this command group available here. That is, skip this all breakpoints command group, and once this is there, then also Control B or Shift Control B works for creating and removing breakpoints. So you can use your keyboard instead of the mouse or the context menu. Okay, this was it about the breakpoints. DASM, well, that's rather straightforward. That's just a change here in the preferences. So when we go to 2600, go to DASM, it just means that here now this rather complex looking default parameters, they are changed now, so they work as you would expect by default. Yeah, now for the symbols view. For the symbols view, I pick a more complex example. It has a number of more symbols. I say compile. And now I have here the symbols view. By the way, in case any of these views is missing, you can always make it visible via show view other. And now I want the symbols view, and there it is. Yeah, so I could, if I turn this one off, I can always search for the symbols view and make it visible again. So after the assembler has completed and all the files have been created and the output was parsed, you get this display. You see the type of the symbol, you see the bank. This was assembled too, in case you're using METS multiple bank format. You have the name of the label or symbol or procedure, whatever it is, and its value both in hexadecimal and in decimal. And what I can do now is I can just type DL, and it will automatically filter everything with DL. And I can type 6, and it will filter everything containing 6. And if I have now maybe DL and 6 separated by a space, then this will be considered an AND. Yeah, also the tooltip says that. Yeah, you can type one or more substrings separated by space to filter the result. This is not the current state that you see here. Of course, this is done only after the assembler has completed. So here you see for the symbols to which file this refers to, when this file was assembled, and how many symbols were in there. Okay, the preferences. Yeah, if we go to the preferences for the assemblers, then I can, for example, change now the commands to be bold. Yeah, look at that. There is a command. It's not yet bold. And if I click OK now it's bold. Yeah, and you see this happened immediately. And it was fast. There was no multiple redraws. So this now simply works as it should. Can deactivate this also. And via export general preferences, you now have a preferences section where you can export this to a preference file. Yeah, so this case then later this is mainly a text file that contains all the preference information. I can WUDSN and save this. And now I have exported to a file, and later you can also import this again from the file system. This is maybe helpful if you have multiple versions of the IDE installed or different machines where you want to cross-transport your preferences. Yeah, the Hex Editor. Let's look at our code. Let's look at the hello world maybe is too small. So let's open the Hex Editor. In the Hex Editor, we have previously had already here the list of file modes that are supported. There are now 2 more file modes that are supported, METS file and SpartaDOS-X. And what's also in there is that you can now choose the character set for the visualization. So this can be standard ASCII character set. This can be the Atari ASCII character set or screen code, depending on whether the text that you have is now ASCII or screen. And you can even switch to the international character set of the Atari, also in screen mode. And the same for C64 with the corresponding character sets that are then really used in here. What you also can do is you can choose another number of bytes per row, which may be helpful if you want to see things that are technically lines of text on a screen. Yeah, default remains 16. Yeah, so as for these additional new file types that are supported, I jump to my reference project. Where do I have my reference project? I don't have my reference project here, so I link it. So I copy this path and I add it here. So this is now an arbitrary folder on the file system. I just want to get access to it, so I link it here to my project, because what I actually want to show is the support for the additional file formats. So I have here an example from FlashJazzCat, part of the GOS, which is used as an example. And now we see here there are the different types of blocks which are part of this METS format, the actual block with the relocatable data, then the information where to put which label, and then dynamic symbols linked from the outside. Similarly for SpartaDOS, if I have a non-relocated SpartaDOS, then we have here non-relloc blocks, and we have update symbols blocks for external references. So this is helpful if you really develop complex applications and things for SpartaDOS or the GOS. What did I miss? Oh yes. So if I want to now, if I have one of these sections here via the context menu, I can now say selection as, and it will default it to a separate file. And now I have this bin file, which is exactly this one block. So if I open this again, it's a bin file, and it's exactly this one block that I have now saved out of this complex file. This is helpful for extracting sections like character sets or raster music tracker files that are part of a larger executable. And I think the last thing in the Hex Editor is this copy in block format. So what's this for? So this creates something like that. And you see here that now also, even though it's decimal, there are decimal values, they are aligned. So if I go to block selection mode, I can now say, oh, I want to cut all of these. Yeah, or I want to add multiple rows. So sometimes when you fiddle around with graphics, player missiles, character sets, this might be helpful if you prefer decimal data. With hexadecimal data anyway, every number has been 3 digits in the past already. Yeah, the sound editor. As said, this is not an editor, it's a player. I'm not sure what is going to happen now if I actually click this, if you will hear my voice. Yeah, I pause because I'm not sure if you can hear my voice otherwise. So what do we have here? Well, we have here the no, that's a long title. I want a different title so it's readable. I'm in the wrong example. I don't want an hexadecimal example. I want a sound example. So what you see here is from the file, you see the title, you see the format, which is here KS Music Composer. If author and date are known from the file, this is displayed also, which is not the case for CMC files, but maybe here for Ballblazer, which was done by Peter Langston. You see how if it's stereo or mono. You see the replay frequency and whether it is for PAL or NTSC, which may both combined can make a difference. And typically musics have music players. They have an init address that is called once and a player address that is called with a replay frequency. And here you see also these addresses displayed. If a module contains several songs, then they are listed here with their duration and whether they loop. And by clicking here, you can play them. Yeah, there is play, there is pause, there is stop. You can also use the playing position bar to scroll through the song. And a feature relevant for developers is that you can actually, not in this case because not in RMT. So if you have an existing file in SAP format maybe, or maybe you use this one. Yeah, I can now select, if I press this, then I'm actually offered to export this again in corresponding format. So depending on what this is, the format is different. Yeah, not all files still contain the relevant information required to export it in the original format, but if it's there, then you can export it here in the let's take this one. For example, if it is an RMT, you can export it as executable, as RMT file, or as sub file. Yeah, and as said previously, there is going to be an own video tutorial on how to use that in your own code. Yeah, graphics editor, let's see. Graphics, there is Apple, and there is a new converter, so you can convert things to Apple high resolution graphics, and it's a new default script that is supported. And yeah, now for the online help. So let me go here in the online help system. If I go to help contents, maybe I make this larger, then you have here the WUDSN IDE guide. What's new is here you have not only the video tutorials that you may already know, but also this release information with the update sites and the videos. We have the support for multiple languages for the assemblers. That's what I had already mentioned. So if I go to Maths General, no, actually that's not here. That's in the, yeah, that's not visualized here. But you see it effectively if I go to Maths. Maybe I just do it. If I go to Maths and say, I want a Maths file. So if I open the compiler help, then it will now actually open the English version of Maths, even though there is also the Polish version installed. And if my primary language was Polish, it would use that. So let's go back to the help. So we have a section CPUs, which lists the different CPUs there are with the opcodes and their addressing formats that are supported, and how they are named in the different assemblers, because that is not necessarily the same. So this is helpful if you want to transfer code from one assembler to another. Yeah, visualization has changed, so there is less clutter around all the tables that you see here. Let's see if there's more. No, I think that's basically it. And yeah, in the FAQ there are a few more entries that have been added. So there are sometimes issues with certain key combinations that don't work on every platform because they're already in use. Here it is described how this is the case. And a problem that arose recently with newer Eclipse versions, that sometimes you really have the problem that it gets incredibly slow and you don't know why. So be assured it is normally not the reason because of the WUDSN IDE plugin, because of some other plugins going wild. And to find out what the reason is, you can open the workspace. So let's open the workspace. Maybe I'll just show that. So if you have performance issues, go to the workspace, go to the metadata folder, open the log file, which is a plain text file, and check what messages are in there. So what happens sometimes if the plugin goes wild, it will spam this file with megabytes of stack traces, and then Eclipse will block because it will be writing the log file all the time. So that is where you should look at if you face performance issues. Other than that, you can of course always contact me. Yeah, so let's close it. Open the hello world. This is where we started. Revert. And yeah, back to square one. It's out. It's usable, so please use it. I'm looking forward to your feedback. And see you. Bye.